Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Christin, and I'm here from the NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center in Woods Hole. And I'm excited to tell you about my work on automatic identification of individual right whales. So right whales number only in the hundreds. They were heavily hunted and they continue to face many threats today, primarily entanglement in fishing gear and vessel strike. At the Northeast Fisheries Science Center in Woods Hole, we conduct aerial surveys to monitor the distribution and abundance of the North Atlantic right whale. And when we find right whales, we circle overhead to photograph them. And under idyllic conditions, we get the perfect photograph of a mother calf right whale like this. You can see the white pattern on the top of their head, which is what we use to recognize individuals. That's a white callosity against an otherwise dark background. And shout out to the NOAA pilots, one of whom is in the audience here, for circling with precision to get these amazing photographs. It's not easy to catch a whale in its brief moment surfacing at the surface of the water there. So once we take these photographs, we go back to the office, we compare them against the catalog maintained by the New England Aquarium to match the individual right whale. Now, knowing the individual identity of the whale really allows a very nuanced understanding of the species. We're able to track much more accurate estimates of abundance, reproduction, demography, movement patterns. This species is so well studied that for many of the animals, we know who their mother was and what year they were born. Now, sometimes recognizing individual whales is really easy. There's whales like Ruffian here with heavy scar patterns on the back that I can recognize from 2 miles away in an airplane without having to consult the catalog. However, some whales have limited sighting records. They may have a fairly generic callosity pattern. They may be young whales who have been photographed very many times. And in those scenarios, it can be pretty frustrating. So on one such day, trying to match hundreds of images from a recent flight, I took a break from my matching process and sort of popped onto Facebook to see some friends' photographs, and was immediately greeted by the suggestion that I might want to tag myself in the photo. And the irony of this was just infuriating. It was like, I don't need you to recognize me, but could you tell me who this whale is? That would be great. So that kind of got the gears churning on this project. Facebook can recognize me. Technology's really come a long way in recent years. And can we harness this technology for the benefit of wildlife biology? So after bouncing the idea around with some colleagues, I hit on the idea of a Kaggle competition. Kaggle is a platform that bridges the gap between data problems and data solutions. They host data science challenges, and data scientists from all over the world compete to tackle the latest innovations in the field of computer vision and take advantage of these large, clean, and curated data sets provided for them. So we provided 7,000 images that were all taken by aircraft of a single right whale, and used 4,500 of them in training the algorithm, and then an additional 2,500 were reserved for testing the results. And there were 364 teams from around the world that competed on this challenge with 470 individuals, literally more than there are right whales, and had some really fascinating conversations via the forums with data scientists all over the world who don't even know what a whale is, saying the finger doodle on their head. And I sort of, okay, maybe I need to at least give you some basic words of what we're talking about here. But it was, I feel like just the increased awareness on right whale issues alone was worth it. So I was obviously thrilled and excited to see the results, holding my breath. I was also a bit terrified because this was really, I didn't know if this was going to work or not. However, the winning solution actually identified individuals with 87% correct classification from a company called DeepSense AI based in Poland. And their solution relied heavily on neural networks. Neural networks are modeled after the human brain, and they exchange information, adapt to inputs, and they're capable of learning. In particular, this relied on convolutional neural networks, which respond to overlapping regions in an image. The solution that won the top first place did it using a series of these convolutional neural network algorithms chained together. First, there was a head localizer. Turns out initially just even knowing what part of the image contained a whale was a challenge, and the algorithms were really getting distracted by waves and whitecaps and birds and the color of the ocean, all things that were quite irrelevant. So they found that first they needed to where in this image even is a whale. Then once they had that, they did a head aligner, which was also done with a convolutional neural network algorithm that essentially turned these photographs taken from a variety of perspectives and a variety of distances and made them standardized. Just in the same way that you'd have an easier time recognizing humans from passport photos rather than snapshots at a party from various angles. So then when they had these cleaned and standardized passport photos, they trained the convolutional neural network algorithm to recognize the individual whale from those photographs. Finally, there was a little bit of averaging and tuning to fine-tune the predictions and maximize the accuracy. And the resulting algorithms are open source and available on GitHub. So overall, I was really pleased with the success of running the competition. We had 364 teams participating. I learned that convolutional neural networks really are a game changer in this whole field, and the best solutions tend to rely on those. The winning algorithm was 87% correct, and we received the source code on GitHub. So once the competition was over, I actually collaborated with the winning team to write a paper that just came out in Conservation Biology. This was a real challenge, both coming from very different perspectives with me as a biologist and them as computer vision specialists. And also, they were from Poland. They didn't all speak English, so it really took a long time. But I think we succeeded in our goal in trying to communicate the computer vision perspective to a broader audience of biologists who may not have a lot of experience in this field yet. So while the competition was a great success, going from the algorithms that were successful to a solution that we could deploy that would be accessible to field biologists with no training in machine learning turned out to be a huge challenge. And it took a long time to both figure out and fund an ideal solution to this problem. Eventually, we learned that this company, WildMe, has actually already harnessed this technology and created the platform infrastructure that was doing a lot of the things that we need to do. So we were able to take advantage of their previous funding from the National Science Foundation and Microsoft AI for Earth, and to work with them in a way that really made it a lot easier for us. They actually made one of the first applications of computer vision to wildlife biology by taking an algorithm that had been written for a NASA star pattern matching and applied it to whale sharks, which I just thought that was a brilliant idea. So we were able to get DeepSense AI, which is the company that won the competition, to work in collaboration with WildMe, who has this infrastructure platform for cloud hosting on Amazon Web Services and a front-end user interface for biologists, and get them to work together collaboratively such that the strengths of each organization are used, and we're really creating something better than any one of us could do alone. The folks from DeepSense AI agreed to a technology transfer in which that they were going to collaboratively train the algorithms on new data with the folks from WildMe and sort of transfer the nuances of that algorithm over to the team there for future development. And so it's a really exciting partnership. We're getting the best of all worlds here. And since we are retraining the data now on a larger data set because it was successful, we're using a full data set of images. And so this is a really good opportunity to bring in the closely related southern right whale in the southern hemisphere, which looks morphologically very much alike. So we're working closely now with researchers in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, and Brazil to bring in all of that data and then retrain both the algorithm that won the competition and also this native hotspotter algorithm created by WildMe. And so we'll train both algorithms on a larger data set and really be able to use our technology to help the folks in the Southern Hemisphere as well, who often are much less well funded, and they have a ton of images, and it really has the potential to cross-match between catalogs down there in a quick and automated way, which is really exciting. So it's been a long, slow road to get to this point, but we are hoping to launch this summer and have something that biologists will really be able to use at that point. And I wanted to just play a little short video that tells you more about the things that it wanted me.
There are an estimated 90,000 threatened species across the globe. To understand what puts a species at risk, we need to know where are they born, how many survive, where do they go, how far do they go.
At Wildbook, we are using an algorithm to digitally tag individual animals, much like a human fingerprint. So this is a new whale shark for science.
Yes, the names.
Over the whale shark.
Microsoft AI gives us the building blocks to analyze public streams of photos and videos and identify individual animals in an instant. AI can determine location, date of sighting, migration patterns, and even an animal's social group. And an intelligent agent can contact the content owner and ask for the missing detail. Microsoft's AI for Good initiative gives us the technology to create a comprehensive view of the planet's biodiversity. In the last 10 years, we've identified 10 times more whale sharks than ever recorded in human history. By leveraging citizen scientists together with researchers, we can form conservation policy. Microsoft AI will help us accelerate our work by empowering people to take action. What we get back is, wow, this is amazing.
So really, in summary, what I want you to know is that deep learning is really amazing. It's come a long way in recent years. And so I would encourage you all to really think outside of the box and think of what work do you do that could be automated. This is really going to be changing the future of how we interact with big data in the coming years. And now I'll take questions. Do you want to start with the phone? Or?
Oh, we can start online or we can start in person. Whichever. Does anyone have a question in the room?
Yes. So what is the biggest technical challenge that you face?
Why
87% to 900%?
Because it was a competition that went for 3 months. I mean, it was a first pass. I think we could get higher. It is also pretty hard to recognize individual right whales. It's not easy. Another challenge we faced with running the initial competition is my criteria for image inclusion was just that it had to be a single whale. We often have photographs of multiple whales. I decided for this first pass that was too challenging. I was going to just do images that had a single whale that we knew who it was. But sometimes we know who it was because there was a series, and this picture was really good, and this picture is actually pretty terrible, and we might not have been able to recognize it as a standalone. So some things like that. There's some quality of the source images. There's also, I think, a big factor of the angle of the whale and the whether the full callosity was visible above the water or whether some of it was under the water. There also are some whales which we as humans may recognize because it's got this weird scar on its back, and the algorithm was completely not taking that into account at all. So there are a lot of factors, but I think we will be increasing the accuracy over time. I don't think we've hit our maximum yet, but we're also going to throw additional challenges at it this time and give it images with multiple whales and include drone and vessel-based perspectives, and we're going to sort of throw the book at it and see what happens. So we will probably get some gains and some losses. But in order to make the accuracy really high, we probably would have had more of we would have had to have an image quality criteria, which would have made it really less useful for us. So we almost would rather have it be less successful overall, but more flexible and willing to take some subpar images, because that's what's helpful to the biologists. You know, that totally perfect photograph of a super distinctive whale, we probably don't need help matching. So it's the more challenging cases we need help with anyway.
We have a few more questions in the room.
Did you deploy the algorithm locally, and what kind of hardware did you use as far as the wild?
Yeah, so the question was whether or not I ran the algorithm locally and what sort of hardware requirements it had. To run these algorithms quickly, you really need a high performance GPU, graphics processing unit, which is pretty expensive and requires a sophisticated computer, which that was part of the challenge in implementing this for me, because I wanted to implement a solution that could be used by any field biologist who took an aerial photograph of a right whale. And I know that there's a variety of equipment, and I know that a lot of the nonprofits might not be using the newest computer. So I really didn't want a solution that required a high performance computer. So that's why in the end, we went the solution of the algorithms will actually be cloud processed, and then so it'll be a web interface that the user interacts with, so they aren't really running the algorithms on their own machine. I did successfully get the algorithms running on my laptop, which is not terribly new and fancy, but they just took a little while. So it is possible to do it on a CPU instead of a GPU, but it takes a while. And the sort of process of setting up the environment in your laptop was such that I didn't want to try to replicate that across 20 different individuals. So it turns out that in my case, an online solution was better. If you've only got 1 or 2 people doing it, then you might be better just doing it locally. But I was really trying to make it available, not just for myself, but for a lot of folks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And one more question in the back.
Christin, this is, first of all, I think completely game changing. Having tried to match right whales myself, and I'm horrible at it.
It can be really hard.
It is really hard. And I was just curious, what is your, I guess, timeline or your challenges moving forward? Are you guys looking for more funding, or is it just time to sort of build these interfaces to be able to launch them?
So I am cautiously optimistic that a lot of the giant hills are behind me, and it looks as though we might be able to deploy something that people can use this summer, assuming no further unexpected obstacles. So I think part of what took a long time is just the learning curve and me naively assuming that this winning algorithm meant success, and that, you know, we could hack something together, and I have some resources, and we have websites, and surely NOAA could just host this, and it turned out that there was just a ton of obstacles and the technical solution. And so our partnership with WildMe really solves a lot of those problems, because they've worked out a lot of those kinks. And then, you know, initially sort of navigating how to work with WildMe when I also wanted to work with the winning algorithm, and they were 2 different companies, and thank goodness everyone just was like, yes, this is what makes sense, this is our strength, this is their strength, we'll just do it together. So we finally got there, but it took a while. But yeah, I'm hopeful the big hurdles are behind us. I mean, maintaining it going forward, it will need to be retrained in the future, and you know, there are still some obstacles, but with any luck we should have it by next year.
When you talk time frame, are you talking like on your computer minutes versus the cloud, or are you talking like hours on your computer versus the cloud seconds or whatever? What's the time frame you're talking about for algorithm detection?
Yeah, and I don't know that I have a really precise answer to that, but I think for one photograph, cloud hosted can be nearly instantaneous, whereas on my computer it might have been a minute or 2. It would also be nice, however, to upload, we often come back from a flight with 200 images, and it would be great not to do that one at a time, but just to sort of throw a folder of images. And now you're talking the difference between hours and possibly days.
Okay.
I have a question about the sort of technical aspect of this. So are these identifications binary? 87% accuracy, are they binary? They're saying yes or no, or do they come with a percentage confidence?
Yeah, so it's sorry. Yes, the question was just for some further explanation of what that 87% accuracy means, whether it was a binary yes, no. So it's something used in the computer vision field called top 5 accuracy, where for any given photograph, they submitted their top 5 likely matches. And so whether or not the whale of interest was contained in the top 5.
We have one more question in the room. I had a question about the WildMe platform. Right now, I guess if you just use an aerial shots, you're probably just getting actual biologists. Are you looking, if you move on to adding vessel-based photos, to getting public photos, or is this just going to be like an invite-only group that can upload photos to it?
Yeah, so WildMe actually really specializes in the citizen science arena, and they collect a lot of opportunistic reports of manta rays, and they have a really good way of collaborating with anyone who wants to submit a photograph of a humpback whale or a manta ray. In the case of right whales, that's not really appropriate for us because they're so endangered. There's a 500-yard approach restriction. So we're not looking to engage citizen scientists on this particular topic. We don't want to encourage people to be trying to photograph right whales. So this particular project is geared more towards scientists, but WildMe as a platform does engage with citizen scientists on other species.
So I have a few questions.
Sure.
So how long have you been working on this, and can you speak a little bit more about training the algorithm?
How long have I been working on this, and can I speak to training the algorithm? The how long I've been working on this, I think I've blocked out because it's a little painful. I've been working on this at least since 2017. I think possibly before then. It really took me probably a year from the concept of a Kaggle competition to running a Kaggle competition. There actually was a lot of trouble navigating the NOAA bureaucracy on the topic, and as a federal employee, am I even allowed to be involved in running competitions? And it turns out that I am, but it took some time and some discussions with NOAA legal to get that answer, so that there were a lot of roadblocks and obstacles overcome with delays in between. So it probably took a month just to get the competition running, a year to get the competition running. And then the competition itself ran for 3 months, and it has now been over for almost 2 years. So that part also has taken a really long time, which, is another one of the funny things in collaborating with the computer vision folks in Poland. They're just like, why are we still working on this paper from something we did 9 months ago? This is like old news now. They're sort of published that week or month, or it's old from their perspective. So that was really fascinating. But biology journals do not work that way, and that's how long it takes to get it out. So, and then speaking to the training, so I'm not a computer vision expert myself and haven't personally done the training. So I'm not, maybe if you have a more specific question, I can see if I can answer it, but I don't think I guess what I could do is point you to our paper, and in our paper is a link to a really detailed computer vision centric nitty gritty of the method. So that information is out there. And I also can point anyone to any of the relevant experts as well if you have specific questions.
Another question, have there been any surprises in what factors the algorithm uses to identify the right whales versus what we have traditionally used to identify whales?
So the question, do I need to repeat the online questions? I don't, actually. I just remembered that. So convolutional neural network algorithms and the deep learning algorithms in particular that were used in this competition as all of the top winning solutions were using these methods. It's really a black box. You don't tell it what to look for. You don't, the only thing that the winning solution told it was, here, I found the whale's head for you, look there. But that's really it. So we don't know, we assume that probably the algorithm is keying in on some of the same features that humans do, but we don't know. They're doing it in a very abstract process where segments of the image are being transformed in different ways. And yeah, we don't really have any insight into that. Machine learning in the convolutional neural network sense is a black box. You don't tell it what to look for. It just tells you what it found.
Kind of in follow-up to that, with additional power for identifying right whales, can we expand a similar algorithm to start identifying lineage, paternity, or maternity?
So for North Atlantic right whales, we know a lot about maternity based on observations of calves in the presence with their mother and having the calves biopsy sampled and then linked back to their mothers. There's also a lot of paternity analysis being done with DNA work on the fathers. So I'm not sure that this has direct implications for that other than helping to speed up the matching process. There may be other ways that you could use machine learning in those areas, but we do already have a really strong effort on those topics for the North Atlantic right whale, so I don't have any obvious ideas for how we can do that. I know that some folks have mentioned the concept of could we try to look at a calf of unknown lineage and see if we can match that callosity pattern somehow to the mother, but I think that's a pretty bold idea at this point, so we'll see.
Do you have any questions in the room?
One more, yeah. You said you started with 7,000 images and you trained it with 4,500 that were positively identified, and then gave it the other 2,500. But you said it was ranking a top 5 match. How many images for the other 399 right whales that you have in the catalog? How many for each of those did you use to train the algorithm?
And that was another thing I didn't actually think through very well in the beginning because my criteria was just it's a single whale and we have a match for it. So it turns out for some whales I gave them 70 images and for a couple whales I gave them like 2. So that also probably dragged down our accuracy a little bit because for some whales they may have been tested on something they hadn't trained on. So that's possible as well.
That's what's so great about these emerging technologies, though, is that they just get better the more you feed them.
Yeah, they do.
That's what's so exciting.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And from my perspective, 7,000 clean photographs from an airplane of a whale who I know who it is, that's huge to me. The computer vision folks kept referring to this small, poor quality data set. It's like, you try to photograph a whale from an airplane, see how easy it is. But that's the exciting thing about our retraining process too, is by bringing in these images from the southern hemisphere, and we are also going to bring in images taken from drones and cliff-based observation and vessels, and we'll see if we've thrown so much at it that we just break it or not. But it has the potential of really learning from all of those, the more oceanographic conditions and different colored water and weird dolphins that are in the picture and all the little idiosyncrasies of each photograph, the more of them we train it on, the more it understands those things. So it'll be interesting to see the results of this next training round.
This is not a machine vision question. This is more of a biology question. So where do the whales migrate? What's their range?
Yeah, so the North Atlantic right whale, which is the species I study, ranges from Florida to Canada. They go down to Georgia, Florida vicinity to calve in the winter, and then they actually can be found in that whole range, really, in some number year-round, but they tend to concentrate on the southern breeding grounds for a period of time in the winter, and then in the fall, they're often found in the Gulf of Maine off of Cape Cod, and they've been increasingly spending more time in the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada in recent summers. And then the southern hemisphere distribution is much broader, kind of swath across the southern hemisphere, and there are research groups working in Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, South Africa, and Argentina. And so they have independent catalogs. So this will also be a really interesting opportunity to see if are we finding any whales in multiple catalogs down there.
Are they sticking close to the coast, or are they?
I know less about the southern hemisphere, so rather than putting my foot in my mouth, I think I won't answer that one. But in the North Atlantic, they do tend to have a fairly coastal distribution. They can be found offshore depending on where the food is, but they, compared to many other species, tend to be found close to the coasts. One of the reasons that they have sort of a hard time sharing the habitat with humans is we tend to overlap a lot, and that's challenging for them when they're in areas of high fishing gear presence and vessel traffic.
We have a few more questions online.
Sure.
Where do you see this being used, and can we start using this to expand or modify the seasonal management areas?
Well, expanding or modifying the seasonal management areas is something that I know that the folks at GARFO are always thinking about how best to do that. And that would be based on sightings information. So sightings of individual whales in the area, but the identity of a whale isn't always super important for some of these management decisions. Knowing that there are 10 whales in a region is the same as knowing who those 10 whales are in a region. So I don't think that this particular ability to recognize individuals with greater speed will be so relevant to the spatial management. I think in general, deep learning has the potential to really revolutionize a lot of things. I mean, just looking at the different competitions that come across the radar on the Kaggle platform, it's really fascinating the kinds of competitions people are running and the kinds of challenges they're tackling. I mean, everything from medical industry, where they're having the machine learning algorithm find the tumor in some sort of an image, or the insurance industry that's trying to predict cost-benefit analysis based on these input variables. I think we're really at the beginning of a lot of things happening in this field, and we're probably going to see more and more applications to it, especially with large volumes of data and the need to quickly process them.
And going back to this exact algorithm, if we don't know what the algorithm is identifying or using to identify the whales, can we be sure that they can identify the whales as they get older?
Well, we'll be continuing to evaluate and test the accuracy of the algorithm. And another thing that I should make clear is there's no intention to just let this algorithm run wild and blindly trust it. We'll use the algorithm to speed up the process of finding a match, but then that match will still be verified by humans. We're not at a point of thinking that the algorithm is always right and just going to blindly trust it. So it's more like it'll quickly get to the point that a human is just verifying the identity of the whale rather than sort of starting from scratch and wondering which one it is and spending a lot of time just to narrow it down.
Do you have any more questions in the room?
Can you speak on the human accuracy of classification in comparison?
The question was whether I can speak on the human accuracy of classification. There isn't really data on that topic. The New England Aquarium, which manages the photo identification database, I know has done some sort of cross-validation and found an extremely high accuracy rate. I think once in a great while something goes in there unintentionally, but I also think it depends on the person, right? So the folks that make the final determination of which whale is which at the New England Aquarium, they are solid in their determinations, and they're going to be accurate all the time. But when you get a field biologist doing aerial surveys for the first time, for the first year, they're probably going to get some stuff wrong. But then someone else more experienced looks at those and makes a confirmation. So a lot of it depends on your individual skill level.
Was there additional funding for the DKI group, for the paper and collaborating with the wildlife?
This whole, the question was just a question of what funding has fed into this project for a really long time. Until recently, this project was just funded by my overenthusiasm and working on it when I possibly should have been doing other things. The initial Kaggle competition had a $10,000 prize pool, which the MATLAB actually offered to pay the prize money as a way, and they offered a free copy of MATLAB to anyone who wanted to run the competition as a way to just showcase MATLAB's abilities in the field of machine learning. That was about 2 years ago now, and I hear that it's more like $100,000 prize pools nowadays. So I didn't have to pay the prize money, and just there was no funding until recently, which has allowed us to have this collaboration with Wild Me and really get everything into production. And that funding came through an internal NOAA High Performance Computing Center grant.
Any more questions in the room? I think we have a few kind of wrap-up ones online.
Sure.
So is the code available in a code repository?
It is. It's on GitHub. So maybe why don't can we scroll back to the paper? And then if you just Google that, there's a link in there to the GitHub repository. Yeah. So if you Google a few of those words, you'll find the paper. And there's actually 2 GitHub links in there, one to the code repository, one to some initial annotations that were used in the original algorithm development. And then there's also a link to a detailed blog post of the computer vision methods for those who are more interested in the nitty-gritty on that.
I don't see any other questions online. Any more questions in the room?
Okay,
Did you want to talk about that last video?
I think we can skip that.
Okay.
I mean, if you guys want to see the latest and greatest training on preliminary trials on southern right whales, I'm happy to play it. It's a wee bit dry.
Or maybe they can find this on
Yeah.
their own.
Maybe we'll skip that one.
Okay. Let's see. We have one more question. Looks like we're at the end. Thank you so much, Christin.
Thank you.
For coming, and this was great.